So, already last week. Time flies fast. So, in 1 month, you will have already taken the exam, and you most likely will all have passed, right? So, yeah, normally we would have also feedback, but this year there was, I believe, no co-feedback, or otherwise I was not informed. Um, but the feedback I already know. It's two less work for you for 2 HCTS, right? Now, how many hours did you in total spend? Are we talking about a little bit more than 60 hours for this 2 HCTS, or talking we about 80, 90, 80, 90? Good hours, bad hours? Good hours mostly. If you don't have to troubleshoot CI/CD pipelines or waiting for the runners, yeah, that's fixed now. Yeah. What did you learn in this module? Or what is your takeaway? Because, yeah, different automation languages, tools, yeah. What else did you learn? Yes, you learned about CI pipelines, how to write it. We use this GitLab tool, as the university has this on premise here. You learned how we can use this for automation tasks, how we can automatically deploy, how we can yeah, make sure that our infrastructure is in the situation we want to have it, or in the desired state is applied. I believe that's also a lot of skills you can use for other areas. Um, I was, I hope you watched the recording from last week, as I was in Amsterdam, not only drinking beer but also it was really fun to network at the network conference. Yeah, so there was this one topic. I'm at the moment standing in front of a lot of unicorns. So you are unicorns. What does this mean? Your skill set you have is kind of rare, at least in the eyes of some people at the conference. So what does it mean? Not many good network engineers are also good software engineers. And you here at the university, you learn all the skills if you visit the right modules. The software modules, they are kind of mandatory. This one is optional, but the best module, of course. No, you have a lot of skills. You will soon have to think about in which area you want to go. I would be happy if you would be somewhere close to network in your career, but of course, some people prefer some security stuff. Some people will probably go more into the direction of DevOps, Kubernetes, all this fun stuff. I hope that the network itself will gain some, how can I say, sexiness again. We have a lot of really fun stuff we could do, but many people are lacking the skills or the budget or the manpower to achieve this. There is also a trend going on, and I'm a big fan of it, that we go to the way that we try to use the ecosystem from Kubernetes also for using it in the network automation. So not like treating the network as nodes or something like this, but more like leveraging all these tools for automation, orchestration, all the concept of reconsideration loops, all this stuff, to also use it for network automation. So yeah, if you want to go in this area, there are a lot of good jobs out there. It's definitely not one of the bad paid areas. but it's not about the money. It's about the fun we have. Yeah, it's not always fun, definitely, but we have a lot of interesting challenges to solve. It's not just software, it's not just network. We are the unicorns in the middle. But don't worry, you don't have to poop rainy ice cream or how this video was. But yeah, it's if you need any advice finding a job or you have interest in one direction, let me know. Yeah, I have some contacts. I know some. I'm in many channels where they are posting job offerings all the time. Yeah, so just let me know. And of course, if you're writing as ESSA, student project, or then the bachelor thesis, one of the fun areas would be to try to have me as an advisor and do something in network automation. Just let me know if you're interested in that as well. So, what we in these two ECTS were covering is kind of the basic of the basic network automation, right? We were mainly focusing on some tools to have a broad overview of the landscape. We were focusing mainly on configuration change, getting data, screenscaping, Yang, but we did not really cover the full cycle. If you remember week 2, I guess, from Ivan, network automation is more than just this part. This part is the one we normally start. This part is the one who is, as a network engineer, closest to us, because that is what we normally do by hand. But network automation, the vision of some people, there was last year at Denver in November, there were some statements made that people believe that we are close to no ops in 5 years. I'm definitely not on this page. No ops, what does it mean? That we have AI, we have normal operations, then we have AI ops, so operations helping to be more efficient with AI. I totally see that part, because many stuff we can optimize, we can have tools to help. But then the next step would be no ops, so that means that AI also can fix the network and everything, and we are just sitting there drinking coffee and making nice architectural designs. No ops does not mean that we are not used anymore, right? So one thing I'm the least worried is that I will get bored before I'm retired. There will always be a lot of work out there. If we automate the boring stuff, then there is more stuff we can do, right? We have to plan, we have to organize, we have to make architecture, we have to optimize. So don't worry that if you go to network automation that you will not have a job in 5 years. You definitely will have one. Any questions so far? Any questions about the exam? Exam will be easy, right? So, we have talked about configuration, provisioning of devices. What is more there? One part definitely would be the visualization to get the insight, to get transparency of the network. So what we would have is streaming telemetry, for example, as one of the buzzwords, where we can get a lot of data from the network device, analyze it, visualize it, and make prediction with AI, for example. But yeah, we also can have beautiful dashboards, and then we can make the predictions by ourselves. Sometimes it's easier for us to see a trend in a nice graph than without any visualization. Though there is also a lot of work there, of course. Then we have the whole difficult part, as we have seen with the modeling abstraction of our network, right? There is also a lot of discussion in the IETF for digital twin and all this stuff. So if you do bullshit bingo today, I will definitely hit all the buzzwords. Yeah, we have digital twin where we want to emulate getting the whole network and be able to modeling it to also make some predictions to detect anomaly in our network, all this fun stuff. Next to this, of course, we have the classical operations, we have lifecycle, all this stuff. Also something we can kind of easily automate. One part who is maybe, in my opinion, not the easiest to start to fully automate it, but definitely to get a lot of win in the beginning, is the whole troubleshooting, right? So if you remember Ivan's talk, he mentioned service provider you call, you have the first 10 steps are kind of a checklist, right? And if you're in your network, someone has a ticketing issue, network issue, he creates a ticket, you easily can just make the first couple show commands you would do by hand with a workflow engine, for example. You can gathering all information and provide to the engineer. In the best case, of course, you go a step further and you try to solve this ticket, or at least to bring it to a point where you don't have any effect, and then on the next day you can solve it. So one of the important thing for me is, if I would work somewhere and I'm responsible for the infrastructure for the network, I would try everything to avoid that I get a pager call or a picket call at 4 a.m. Because most likely 1 hour before I went to bed. So yeah, would not be so happy to wake up at 4 to solve something that could be easily, or not easily, but could be automated. So troubleshooting is a really interesting area as well, as we can go there. Then of course, if we want to make the management happy, or if we want to sell something, we have to have the whole reporting stuff. That's also an area who is easy to automate, in my opinion. Maybe I should not use the word easy. There are always challenges, but it's something that we can automate. We can generate data. We can get at the moment almost too much data from the network. We can analyze it, and we can make reports. We can make beautiful graphs. We can make billing for the customer and say, you used this amount of IP addresses, you used this amount of bandwidth. If we want to, depending on our service or billing, I would say, if you have pay as you go or something. Yeah, there is a lot of areas where we can focus on our automation. And the fact is that many companies, they are still in the early stage of all of these areas. So at the moment, it's the perfect time to go into this area, because there's so many stuff you can still do. And 20 years, or as some say in 5 years, a lot of these issues are maybe solved. I don't think so, as the network industry is not really how can I say, not the fastest one, like the CLI. We will have CLI in 10 years. We have had it 30 years ago. The CLI will not die. It will still be there. We still need to sometimes to log in, to see some stuff, to troubleshoot. But yeah, my opinion, if you really want to automate your network completely, you have to have the nice abstraction layer of your network with your desired state for different components, and then you should take away all the write access on your boxes. Of course, you need to have breaking glass access, so breaking glass like emergency. If you really need to change something, you have to change it, but then you have to detect this change automatically and maybe create automatically a pull request or something to solve this, so that you have always the desired state. If we are having reconsideration loops, we would automatically see that the network is in this state as we have defined it. But this is not easy, especially for brownfield. There are some people saying a greenfield after 1 month, after 1 week is brownfield as well. And yeah, it most likely is, but it really depends how we design the whole automation, how we allow configuration drift, how we deal with this. And for this, all these different automation areas need to play into each other. One part I forgot was, of course, also the planning. So if we have, if we are a big service provider, we need to plan our network, right? We need to know which glass we have to buy, which upgrades of devices we need to do, which line cards we need. So also in the whole planning we can do a lot of automation to see prediction of traffic flows, for example. And yeah, so there are all these different areas. Probably I forgot some of them. In the end, we have a huge area with a lot of freedom, with a lot of interesting challenges. And questions? Who is thinking about a career in network automation? 3.5, 4? Yeah. But maybe if you see other stuff, you will remember, oh, there was this really awesome area. Let's go there. And yeah, in the end, in the whole infrastructure, everything will get closer to each other. So at the moment, we still have these silos way too much. Like we have the security guys who are anyway weird. Then we have the network guys who are the cool guys who go having a lot of beers. We have the storage guys with these Caro shirts normally. Then we have the VMware guys. But all of this will come closer and closer. Of course, we have this DevOps, who was a huge movement, or still is a lot of movement. But in many companies, we still see this kind of mindsets that are this in silos. But this slowly, very slowly, will most likely getting together closer. So, yeah, I definitely have not enough time to cover all the stuff in these 2 HCTS. I would like to, or maybe this module, if someone wants to, will be 4 HCTS in the future, but at the moment it looks like it will be keeping 2 HCTS. One thing I will cover now is the streaming, right? We did not really have time. Normally it came earlier. I had to make some rearrangements in the module. Therefore, streaming itself will not be part of the exam. But please don't stand up and leave. It's a really interesting area. There is most likely a module later on. Not sure about the naming. And the moment it is called intent-based networking, to hit some other buzzwords. There will most likely be part of it again. So if you are in this module, there will be applications that need streaming telemetry to have the inside of the network, to have the transparency. One thing I did also not have really time is to go one level up. The moment we are always talking about level 1 to 4, sometimes even on level 0, but we need to more focusing also on the application on top. So in the end, what we want to is a good experience for the networking, for the application users. So we had also this, I think it was a bachelor thesis. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was a bachelor thesis where we used IPFix kind of NetFlow to collect metadata of the traffic going through the network, put it in a database, and from there we had open telemetry where you can see which function, which API call has which delay or how long it takes, and we added the network information there so that the application owner could directly see it's not the network or it is the network. Because yeah, sadly many times we still make this finger pointing, it's the network, it's not the network, it's the security guys, it's storage is slow, all this stuff. But if we have more insights, more transparency, this question can also be answered easier. So, in this slide deck we will talk first about streaming telemetry, but then also one nice feature we have would be BGP monitoring. You had the lab with the MPLS, you configured BGP, right? So BGP is kind of a key protocol in this area, and we can use BGP Monitoring Protocol to monitor everything that is exchanged through BGP. BGP can exchange labels, we have seen that, of course IP address, of course the whole internet, and we can also have BGP extensions for layer 2 information. So routing information from OSPF or ISIS can be exchanged with BGP. If we combine this with BGP monitoring, we can collect this data and we see the whole layer 2 topology, for example. So that's also one of the cool possibilities we have. The ENS, if you are into this topic, sure Severin is happy to talk about how this BGP monitoring works, how he uses it in the Jalapeno stack, and aggregate the data in a graph database to have the topology and all the insights of the network. So, goal, if it would be on the exam, it would be the difference between SNMP, monitoring, classical and streaming. Yeah, SNMP, simple network monitoring protocol, where we have pull or push with SNMP traps, where we can have events sending us data, but if we, for example, want to have network traffic or error counters, we most likely will pull every 5 minutes, reading this data and then putting in the monitoring system, and if there is a peak or something, we would get an alert. With streaming telemetry we can also do this, but in a more granular way, so deeper, closer. And yeah, the idea was to know what kind of data with BGP monitoring protocol we would get. So, streaming telemetry, if you remember, we had the Yang models defining the whole data structure, and in these models, if you go through the models, for example for Cisco, you have the native models for configuration, CFG, but then you also have these upper models for operational data, because configuration is one. So if I configure, let's say, BGP, the configuration can totally be fine, but that does not mean that BGP is operational correct. Can be that the session does not come up, that maybe there's a password mismatch, maybe the next hop is not reachable, maybe BFD for bidirectional forwarding detection is too slow and takes the link down. All this stuff we cannot see in the configuration. So if we want to test or if we want to monitor, we have to look at the operational state. So there most of the time are different models where we can see similar data, many times more data than we see in a show command. But it also can be in the beginning really overwhelming to have so much data and then decide which data do we actually need. Because if we just take all the data, it will be most likely way too much. But then, as you have seen with XPath, we can address and say, I want to have the memory footprint of a BGP session to this neighbor. So this kind of data we can collect. There's also possibility to get a timer for how long does it take for OSPF to recalculate the shortest path. That's something I don't know how to get this in a show command, but with the Yang model, if you have the right model, this data can be accessed. And it can really give you also an idea how healthy a network is. If a shortest path recalculation of OSPF takes seconds, there is definitely something wrong in your network, or it's too big, or you have to adapt something. And especially if this number changes, you know that something is happening in your network, and you have to see how you can solve this again. Traditionally, if we would talk about streaming telemetry, I think EATF calls it Yang push, would mean that we can subscribe to a model, to a path, and say, send me this data. We have two options. We can have it time-based, every 1 second, every 1 minute, or some of the endpoints in this data model, they also support event-driven. So I can say on change. So if this error counter changes, I want to get a message. And then of course I have to put this data maybe in a time series database. If it's something like error counters, and I want to have a history and see how it evolves. If it's more data, like if the interface is up or down, and I want to have a possibility to process this, I will most likely use a telegraph to receive it, put it in a Kafka stream, and then I would have some application who takes this and aggregates it in a database like a graph database. So there are many possibilities, and if you ask in a forum, the answer will always be it depends. So yeah, you will have to see what we have. When we're talking about names or roles, we would have a publisher, so a network element sending this data. We have receiver controller, so this is when the piece of software who receives the telemetry data, if we have it combined, but we can also have it separated. Then we have a controller who defines the subscriptions we need, and we have a different receiver who collects all the data. Yeah, and then we're also talking about subscriber, a network element that creates the subscription. So we can have two options. We can have call in, call out. We can have it configured on the device and say send this data to this endpoint, and then it will send the stream. Or we can say I have an application who calls into the box and says I want to have this data, and then the session is open. It depends a little bit on your setup, what kind of data you want. If you want to have it always, if you just need it in some situations to troubleshoot something. And it of course also depends on your firewall restrictions. Some companies, they are really strict that a session can only be started from one side to the other side. That also definitely impacts your design of the streaming telemetry or any automation. So dial in. Yeah, we dial in or we call in. We define the session. If the session goes down, if the box reboots, we have to make this again. If we make the dial out, it is persist. So it means if the box restarts, it will be in the running config, and it will immediately start again to send this data. Yes, sir. So the question was if when we call it streaming telemetry, it has to be YANG, or if it also could be flow monitoring with IPFix. The past have shown that we are extremely good with misusing all the terms we have. So single source of truth is used in so many ways, we should not use this term again. Cloud is used in so many ways. The best description at the moment is someone else's computer. Yeah, all these terms, the marketing section, companies, they will always find a way to use it in their advantage. Streaming telemetry, I would say we should not use it for traffic monitoring, because the other thing is traffic monitoring where we get traffic insights, right? With streaming telemetry, we get operational data insights, and with IPFix, with SFlow, with NetFlow, we would get network traffic insights. Of course, we could also have monitoring ports, we could have IDS systems, all this stuff. So I would separate them. If you want to be more specific, you would talk about YANG push. Then it has to be YANG, right? So yeah, it's not a simple answer, but normally streaming telemetry would be about getting a stream of operational data. Does this answer your question? Okay. So then one thing we see a lot in the industry, also especially to start, would be this TIG stack. TIG stands for Telegraph, InfluxDB, and Grafana. Have everyone heard about these tools separately? Not everyone. Okay. So Telegraph is, I think it's written in Go. Yeah, it's written in Go. It's a tool used to receive a lot of data. There we can have different input and output plugins. I've even seen setups where we have input telegraph, output to the next telegraph to do more stuff there. It's more or less a collector. So we can collect a lot of data and we can directly put it into an InfluxDB. InfluxDB is a time series database, so optimized for a lot of data who just changes over time. And Grafana is then the beautiful dashboard we can have to visualize the data we put in the database. So this is kind of the simplest stack, I would say. Telegraph, you can also put it in a Kafka stream. Kafka, who is really scalable, and then you can have different subscribers to the stream and do some data manipulation, aggregation, and put it back, for example. Yeah, there are some blocks here where you can see also some basic examples. If you want to make a basic setup, that's probably where you start. I also have an exercise uploaded for having a tick stack, also BGP Monitoring Protocol. As this is the last week and the last day, I totally understand that you will not make the lab, but it is there. You can go for the solution. You can also make it later if you have any questions. Let me know. And as I said, it's sadly not part of the exam because it's on the last day. And yeah, here I have just some examples how to configure, so we can maybe yeah, understand it a little better. So on a Cisco XE device, we would have telemetry. Then we would say what kind of telemetry we have. We would use the ETF subscription 100. So this is just a subscription we defined. So this would be call in or call out. Who is for call in? Who is for call out? Yeah. So we configure it. It will be persistent. If the device is booted again, it will send it to this receiver with this IP address here on this port, and we used here, for example, the gRPC TCP protocol. So it does not have to be SSH with XML. It can also be gRPC TCP. Yeah, and one of the important thing is we need to have an encoding. In this case, we have key value GPB encoding. Could also be JSON. So in the lab, normally I use JSON. Just if you would, for example, make a TCP dump, you can see what kind of data it comes. It's more verbose. But of course, if you have in the end a lot of data, you want to optimize it. And one of the ways definitely is then to use GPB binary encoding, or there is what's the name? ETF is making YAML push with CBOR. CBOR also is binary encoding, but of course then of both sides you need to know how they were encoded, and you need to have the details, the protobuf files, for example, in this case here. Yeah, with the filter, with the XPath, we would say I'm only interested in the CPU utilization for every 5 seconds. This is the value we are getting. It does not mean that we get this every 5 seconds. So this is just in the model. The leaf we want to get is the value who is in this 5-second average calculated. And then we get this over a period of 10 seconds, I guess. Would need to read the manual at the moment because I did not really do a lot of streaming telemetry in the last year. If this is milliseconds or tens of seconds or which value I would need to check. But the important thing is we defined the period Or here we also could say we want to have it event driven. Does not make sense because this value will always changing, so most likely will not even support this event driven. One hard thing in my opinion is that many times we don't know from the model itself or from the documentation if event driven streaming telemetry is supported or not by this leaf. Yeah, that is kind of simple configuration, right? On the other side, we would need to configure the telegraph, so our receiver. We have input and output plugins. Here we have the example where we use the Cisco Telemetry model-driven telemetry. So it's 2 times telemetry there, but it's just a plugin name. We defined that we have gRPC, and in real life you most likely would of course then also add some TLS to protect your data. But in labs many times we start simple, that also is easier to debug, and we can fine tune it, for example, so that we say this long name, it should be just interface stat, and then everything here will be shortened, and the influx db output would be then of course where we put it in which database. Pretty simple, right? There are many plugins. Documentation is quite good of Telegraph. You can go through the plugin catalog and see what input, what output it be. You can also do some stuff like API calls. In every 5 seconds I want to go to get the stock market from an API and see the visualize the stock market. Of course there would be most likely be better ways than using some APIs for the stock market and all this stuff, but just as an example, it is highly customizable for your needs. Not sure if it's in CloudOps you use Telegraph, Prometheus? Yeah, okay. As always, there are many tools for similar things. And this would be then the example how it looks. So this is Influx DB with version 2. They have also a UI to see some stuff. We have a select for the mean of 5 seconds in for this CPU utilization we have, and can see how it is changing. This is an extremely simplified example, of course. There are so many values we can monitor, we can get insights. This is just an example, and yeah, for one device. And with this data, of course, we can then also do something nice. And what here is missing is then the Grafana dashboard, where we can different graphs, we can have different insights, we can also have different dashboards. In the lab, you would also have some screenshots in the solution how it could look. But yeah, if the log post in the blog posts I mentioned, I can also send it afterwards. You will also see a lot of fancy graphs, and there's a way to even visualize the network, and yeah, the possibilities are almost endless how you want to customize it. So completely different topic would be then BGP messages or BGP Monitoring Protocol. Now here we can monitor the routes itself, the peer down notification, so neighborships, if a peer neighborship comes up, comes down, we can see this, stat reports, initiation of a new connection between peers, termination, and also route mirroring, so that we get all the route information from a device. So these are the different message types we have in BGP Monitoring Protocol, and normally we have 1 or 2 devices who will send us this information. And we could also need a receiver. There is a Go library like Go BMP as an example, where we can run it, and then it will take these messages and we get nice data out of it. So this is an example where we see the message type neighbor down. So as soon as somewhere in the network this BGP peering goes down with BGP Monitoring Protocol, we would get this event, right? So we would see action down, the remote IP ID, this one went up, down, this timestamp, the AS number, route distinguisher, all this kind of information. And of course now it's up to us to make something with this data. Any questions so far? Yes. You cannot read the info data? I would need to look in the documentation how it is encoded or what is. It also depends on the message type, what kind of information you have. So sometimes you have the routing informations, sometimes this is just an event, right? So there will not be a lot of data. Yeah, I cannot tell you what exactly this information here is supposed to be. We would need to look in the RFC, that's EATF standard. We can look up what exactly needs to be in the information and if it's encoded or not. Or yeah. So as I mentioned, you will learn in another module that we have the layer 2 topology. So OSPF, who knows all the networks, for example, can then redistribute this information, this layer 2 information, the whole database, into BGP. We can exchange it with BGP, but we can also then use BGP Monitoring Protocol to get this information and create a graph of our layer 2 topology, layer 3 topology with this information. This now would be another event when we learn a new network. So the action is now add and not down. And we have the base attributes now, origin, incomplete, next hop, local pref. We don't have all the extreme data in the add event, but it's already enough to know from which neighbor we have learned which prefix and some details about it, right? Questions? Let me see. So one thing now would be that I uploaded the lab, a pretty simple lab with a server who has some memory. I have also, if it worked, yes, of course it worked. One instance running. If you're interested in it, you can here use Go BMP, and you can also use then the tick stack to implement this. So there is also a repository with the tick stack as a compose file, so it's easier. Let me open it. Oh, it's more or less a simple Docker compose where we just start service like Grafana, InfluxDB, Telegraph with all the settings that they work together nicely. Yeah, all the thing. And if you bring it up, you have already, for example, then Telegraph configuration. Make it a little bigger. Where we have the input predefined for MPLS forwarding labels. So you see already this can get kind of long, these paths, so you have to find out the path. And of course, you most likely will have multiple paths. So you don't want to have the whole setup for one value, or you want to have different values from different locations. So this configuration, of course, will then get much bigger. Any questions? If you have any feedback, what I can do better next year, if I'm doing it again, let me know. And otherwise, we will see each other at the exam. When was it? Oh, it's on the 3rd of July at 4. And afterwards, if you don't have an exam on the next day, you can drink a lot of water. Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, see you again sometime.